Hey y'all, this is Louie and welcome back to the show. Today we're going to complain about one of the most infuriating games I have played in recent memory. It is probably one of the worst games I have ever played, and it's one of the worst games on the Super Nintendo. And of course I'm talking about Donkey Kong Country 3. And I don't actually have a copy of it on Super Nintendo, but we're just going to use this one right here, this little GBA version, and be a stand-in for my anger right now. Donkey Kong Country 3 is one of the worst games I have ever played. I am not being hyperbolic, I am not making things up. This is literally one of the worst games I have ever played. And it shouldn't be. It really shouldn't be, considering its pedigree and how, the games that it followed up. This game is the sequel to two of the best games on the Super Nintendo, yet this piece of shit, this is a sequel to not one, but two of the best games on the Super Nintendo, yet somehow this piece of absolute garbage is one of the most infuriating games I've ever seen made. This is one of the worst games I've ever played. I am not joking, and I'm trying to contain my anger and rage right now because I had to re-record all of this, which makes me hate this even more. But you're gonna get the brunt of my rage, so let's get rid of you. And I did play this on Super Nintendo, or a version of Super Nintendo. Look at this thing. Look at it. It's not even yellow. It's a little dirty, but it's not yellow. But I don't actually have Super Nintendo copies of the game. I do have Super Nintendo copies of the first two. Look at those buttes. Look at those. This one's a greatest hit, sadly, but I mean, what are you gonna do? So since I didn't have that, I had to go for the next best thing. So I went for the most official way-ish of being able to emulate this game while having the original controls and roughly the same thing. So I used my Super Famicom Mini, which is totally not hacked or anything like that, and played through the game on stream. Now, full disclosure, I did have to save scum throughout the game because it's terrible, and the save points and just how some of the levels are built are just too difficult. I don't know how most people got through this, and actually talking to people, most people said they never finished it as a kid because it was too hard. So what exactly happened while making this game? Now, today we don't actually have a script or anything. I'm going completely off my head, so this is not going to be a typical let's go through the background of the game, whatever, because I really don't care at this point. We've already done that enough with DK64 and a little bit with Banjo-Kazooie, so this is just going to be complaining. This is just gonna be me complaining about a terrible game I played, and then we're gonna treat it as fact. So let's jump in and figure out what's wrong with it. So one of the first things we should probably clear up is the visuals. The visuals are the easiest thing to understand because of the first things you see when playing the game. The visuals for this game are somehow worse than everything else before it. It doesn't look as good as the first game, it doesn't look as good as the second game, it doesn't look as good as other games on the system, but it doesn't necessarily look bad, if that makes any sense. Now, the game looks, I guess, fine. It looks fine. It uses the same pre-rendered models, the 3D pre-rendered models that they turned into 2D sprites like they did with all the previous games that Rare had made on the Super Nintendo. Even I think Super Mario RPG did this as well. But it used those compressed down 2D sprites, put them on the backgrounds that are made similarly, and somehow they just look bland. They look bland. For one, Dixie is the same model used in the previous game. Kiddy Kong is a brand new model, and then a lot of the new enemies are new, but they're all derived from the same source from before. I don't have like a whole list here of who was new from that, who was not. I just choose to block it out because it makes me so mad. But at least for visuals concerned, I guess it looks okay for a game, but for some reason the visual quality or just like the art direction for the game is not good. It's just not. Compared to the previous two games, which the first game was fairly dark, the second one was a little bit brighter and had a bit more diversity in the places you go. The first game took place almost entirely in jungle-like levels or in minecart levels for some stupid reason, and the second game kind of broke it up a bit more. This one takes place almost entirely in brightness. In bright areas. You got underwater levels that are maybe they get a little dark here and there, but they're mostly bright. You got a snow level, you got levels that are just in like near water, and they're just so bland. They're so boring and washed out, and they do nothing for me. They do nothing for me. And yeah, they're completely forgettable. Every area is very forgettable as far as what goes through. I'm trying to remember the levels there were. Oh my god, I don't even remember. No, there's a snow level. There's a snow level. There's one where you're running around a pier. There's some in caves. But all these just kind of describe other Donkey Kong games that are better, so Good job, 3. You really knocked it out of the park on that one. And then the characters. I mean, like I said, the enemies are all like, who gives a shit? But the big thing is Dixie is held over from the previous one, so she's kind of who cares because she's from 2 anyway. And then Kitty Kong, who decided Kitty Kong was a good idea? Who thought having a baby who cries when he gets hurt or knocked over was a good idea? This whole game is meant to be annoying. Every single thing about this game is meant to annoy you, and that's part of the reason I absolutely hate it. Between the level design, the characters, every little aspect of the game is there to annoy you. And as a little brother, I should like that, but I hate it when it happens to me. Hate it when it happens to me. Next up is the music. Now the music I thought was made just by David Wise, so I'm like, it should be better than it is. Turns out he's not the person who made most of it. It was made by a person, a human being, I'm assuming, named Evelyn Fisher, who has mostly made sound effects. Most of their other stuff in this series was sound effects or other stuff they did with Rare. Last thing they had on their like Wikipedia was like Viva Pinata, and that was like 15 years ago. By the way, Viva Pinata is pretty old. There's your personal attack for the day. So like the music wasn't even done by one of the 2 people who's synonymous with the series. David Wise did a little bit of work on it, but overall it was just whatever. It was serviceable. It's not, I guess, bad, but it's not good. A lot of the songs are the same repetitive few notes over and over again where there's no depth to them. The beginning of the game has like the typical David Wise Jungle Japes like Donkey Kong theme, the bum bum ba dum bum ba dum ba dum bum ba dum, and that actually slaps. And then after that it just drops off in quality. I don't know, there's so many, there's no Sticker Bush Symphony, there's no Gangplank Galleon, this game has nothing like that. It doesn't have anything that's a standout track. Everyone's like, ah yeah, that fucking slaps. Good job, Donkey Kong Country 3. None of that's in here. And even the sound effects, I guess, are fine, but they're mostly the same from 1 and 2, so I don't know. It's really weird with this series. Everyone really holds the original trilogy, the original Rare trilogy. I don't know where I'm pointing at. Everyone holds the original Rare trilogy in like the highest light, like they do every other Super Nintendo game. But this is probably the worst the series is. The Country series might have started and kickstarted Donkey Kong as this style, but honestly, these 3 titles in general are probably the worst ones in the series. DK64 is whatever, we're not really counting that one in, but I'd say Jungle Beat's more fun, DK Country Returns and Tropical Freeze are far better experiences. I'm getting really off topic. I don't remember why I am right now. What was I complaining about? This was a lot more thought out the first time. No, we were on the music and we are on the music. Later games have better music as well. I feel bad for anyone watching this that is trying to follow my train of thought, but this is how it is all the time in my head. And it's just a nightmare. My biggest gripe for this game is the level design. I don't even know where to start with how infuriatingly dull and offensive the level design is in this game. The level design is so bad or boring or generic or derivative, and just nothing about it's interesting. I couldn't tell you a single level that stands out except for one, and it's not for a good reason. It's because it has a stupid snowman in it. Most of the game's levels rely on repeated areas, auto-scrollers, and time limits, or some stupid gimmick. If you remember from previous games, like in the first game you had 3 animal friends, but they were like more stuck to bonus stages or every once in a while in a main stage. The second game brought them back. They had a parrot, I think it's Squawks, and I think maybe On Guard and stuff were back as well. I kind of pushed that game out. It's been about a year since I played it. Now think about that all the time. Think about that all the time. Almost every world includes 2 or 3 areas that are relying on animal friends, which usually includes the boss fight. I think with the exception of 2 boss fights, all the ones in the game are using animal friends. You have one as On Guard, you have one as the elephant, which they barely teach you how to use any of their moves, by the way. They have like the bananas up in the air. They're like, oh, use the Y button and stuff like that. One level near the end of the game has you use almost all of the animal friends in a row to get through the level. And it's so infuriatingly terrible that I just wish I could have skipped it. The boss fights are so boring and uninspired. I just am... Here, I'll just take a look at these. Take a look at these terrible boss fights real quick. Use a gimmick that's only available in that one fight. You never use it again. You don't have time to practice it. You don't really have a lot of experience with it. Like the snowman one. You have 2 lanes where you're throwing a snowball at this dude. That's the only time you'll ever see it. The only time it's in the game. You use On Guard, who you've used once, maybe twice tops beforehand to fight against some like oyster mussel, whatever. I'm not a scientist. I don't know. And that's the only time you ever use him, so you have no chance to practice him except for that one level. And the game uses a life system because it's 1996, so of course it does, because none of the games ever drop that until recently. You die, you get kicked back to the menu screen, and you start over. And these games have almost no checkpoints. There's 1 checkpoint per level, and for bosses, none whatsoever. So you have to do them all in 1 life. And it's infuriatingly difficult, and it's an artificial difficulty. All the difficulty in this game is artificial. There's no actual challenge to it. It's just, I hope you know what you're doing right away. It all is based off trial and error gameplay, which is the worst kind of difficulty. It works in some games, like a Dark Souls type game, where trial and error is how you get through the bosses. You learn all their moves and you master it, because that's the point of the game. To show kind of like how the trial and error gameplay works, let me look at the last world. The last world is where it's at its most egregious point. There are so many levels in the final world that use this kind of egregiously terrible trial and error gameplay to basically pad out the game. You pad out the way to the final boss. There's one level in particular where there's lightning strikes. You have to keep moving, you can't stand still because you'll get struck by lightning. Jump in the water, struck by lightning. If you're too fast, too slow, struck by lightning. So it requires you to be exact, perfect, pixel perfect movements, which is not fair or fun or anything. I'm getting all like frustrated just thinking about it. The pixel perfect gameplay and requiring absolute precision to get through it is just a very unfair way to pad out a game and an unfair way to challenge people. Because if you just didn't know yet, you'd have to keep dying over and over again to something you did not know that was going to be there just to make it through. It's such lazy design. It's the absence of real challenge. It's really, we didn't know what to do, think what we were thinking, and then figure it out and do it perfectly. Fuck that. Screw that so much. I don't know why ever was good gameplay. So having trial and error gameplay, limited lives, limited continues type of thing like that. How are you supposed to get through this game without it just being a complete waste of your time? And it was a complete waste of my time. I had to save scum throughout most of the final level. I'm not the type that likes to do that. I have no problem with save states. I have no problem with emulation, but I would have liked to play this on the Super Nintendo. And I'm very happy that I didn't, because it would have been an even worse experience than it was having the ability to save wherever I wanted. Developers, if somehow you're watching this, even though no one is probably gonna watch just another bearded white guy rant on YouTube about something, stop fucking doing this. I know this is a game from 1996, but you still do this now. And having this type of style on top of the already generic, boring, samey looking environments that you go through over and over again, adding time limits, auto-scrolling elements, and just way too many enemies rows, too many things going on, relying too much on gimmicks. It is one of the worst experiences I can think of in a game. It's one of the worst times I've ever had, that to the point where I almost just like shut the game off and ended stream. I almost shut it off, ended it, deleted it, never wanted to deal with it again. I would actually like to destroy a copy of this because I'm so infuriated, but I'm trying to hold back that rage. But if you would like to help me with that wish, goal, whatever, just send one down to my P.O. box here and I'll do it on camera. We'll give it to the geese maybe, although I'd feel really bad about giving the geese Donkey Kong Country 3 because they deserve better than this. We all deserve better than this. It's kind of happy that like Rare doesn't make these games anymore. Returns and Tropical Freeze, though both difficult, were far more fun and fair. Even Tropical Freeze on the Switch added a funky mode because they knew it was difficult and they wanted to get people to just experience the game instead of having this constant need to be overly challenged for no reason. And that's the biggest issue. There's no reason for the challenge other than fuck you and fuck your time. Whoever made these games were a bunch of sadistic people who hated children, allegedly, but that's my take on it. I know this is a very different type of Retrosaurus, but I just needed to get this venting out. I've been so pent up with anger for this game that I just need to get it out there and just give my thoughts, even though they're rambly, incoherent, and I don't even know what I've already said. When I go through it, I'll probably be like, oh my god, this guy sounds deranged. But yeah, thank you for watching this episode of Retrosaurus. Hopefully we'll have a more normal one soon. Maybe, I don't know. But most likely, yeah. Thank you for watching. I'll see you later. My name's Lou. Check out my stuff.